Welcome again, participants, to this MOOC course on climate change vulnerability and adaptation. I am Shahab Fazal, faculty in the Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University. In our previous discussion, I explained the evidences of climate change, the scientific evidences for warming of the climate system, unequivocal pointing categorically towards climate change. So the climate change is reality. The climate change is also progressing towards a critical point. And in this session, I would be highlighting the tipping point of climate change. I intend to highlight on the climate change realities and also emerging vulnerabilities. That is the outcome of human activity over the Earth's surface. We discussed climate change, its causes, the evidences, and its impacts. There is intense human activities, there is no doubt about it. Emissions are increasing, population is also increasing, and global temperatures are also increasing, which is resulting into glacier melting, sea level rising, and extreme and erratic weather events. And they are also quite widespread all over the globe. So these are very clear indication of erratic weather pattern over the Earth's surface. But significantly, these events are not linear, or even I would say they are not predictable. That means that they do not appear in clear or direct phases. The bottom line here is that it is a very complex phenomena, really complex. But climate change is really happening also. And in that context, in this discussion, I would be highlighting that this climate change, we are inching towards critical point. I am using the term tipping point. So what can be said as critical or tipping point? Now, you have a fair idea of the phenomena of climate change. Now, scientists suggest that 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature rise is the critical threshold. But it does not mean that reaching this 1.5 degree Celsius temperature, this level of climate change will suddenly happen and something would struck abruptly on the Earth's surface. No, it's not that way. I would say the impacts are not abrupt and also not certain. They might be gradual also. And in some instances, even small increases can pose serious consequences. So in that context, this critical point and the tipping point is very important to understand. The important understanding about the tipping point is that these points, these moments, these tipping points are irreversible. That means once we touch or reach to the tipping point over the Earth's surface on any of the phenomena, they are not irreversible even if we manage our acts more efficiently. So the tipping point, as I am saying, they are irreversible, and I would say they are turning points on Earth. If I can give you one example, like dinosaurs, they disappeared from the Earth. This is how some species, some animals, some plant, the biodiversity may disappear, or in physical situation, some forests, ice covers, they might disappear over the Earth's surface, which even if we modify our acts over the Earth's surface, they cannot be recovered back. That is what the tipping point is all about. So why this tipping point is significant? Because any particular climate component, the shift from one state to a new stable state may take many decades or even centuries. This means a level of change in climate system properties beyond which the system reorganizes in a non-linear manner and it does not return to the initial state, even if the drivers of the change are restored. Now, here you need to think about it, that how significant is the climate change phenomena. And in this context, for the climate system, the term tipping point refers to a critical threshold at which global or regional climate changes from one stable state to another stable state. Now, the current levels of greenhouse gas emission, it risks triggering climate tipping points. As I have said, that tipping point is a critical threshold that when crossed leads to large, accelerating and most importantly irreversible changes in the climate system. And many parts of the Earth system are undergoing large-scale changes. As in my previous discussion, I have highlighted that ice sheets are shrinking at a very fast pace. Sea levels are rising. The coral reefs are dying off. These are shifts in climate system that cause devastating, irreversible changes. Scientists suggest that there are 9 parts of the climate system which are sensitive. Sensitive in the context of tipping point. They include ice sheets, ocean currents, and major forest cover over the Earth's surface. It is possible that some tipping points are close to being crossed or have already been crossed, like those of the West Antarctic ice cover, the Greenland ice sheets, and also Amazon rainforest. Now, the most alarming outcome, if I can explain that, the crossing of one tipping point could lead to triggering of further tipping elements, resulting in a domino effect, or I can say chain reaction, which can lead to some places becoming less suitable for sustaining human or even natural systems. So these tipping points are very critical in the context of climate change. If I can give one example which is very prominent over the Earth's surface, the scientists are very concerned about it. It is about the Arctic is warming almost 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world. So you see, global warming is happening over the Earth's surface, the entire Earth's surface, but its impact is more on ice sheets over the Earth's surface. And that is why the Arctic region is a very important and critical tipping point. There is evidences of accelerating ice melt from the Greenland ice sheet. This in turn could be what is slowing down the ocean's circulation of heat, in turn impacting the monsoon system of South America, not only South America, but also among Asian countries also. So it's a very complex and global phenomena. The impacts are at some location over the Earth's surface. The incidences, evidences are at some location, the impacts are at some other location. So these monsoon changes may be contributing to the rising frequency of drought. For example, in Amazon rainforest, lowering its carbon storage capacity. I have discussed in my previous discussion on this topic. And intensifying the climate warming, global warming. Some tipping systems are already at risk for crossing tipping points at the present level of global warming. I have referred to the Greenland and West Antarctic ice sheets. There are also many permafrost regions, coral reef die-offs. All of them, they are very prominent. You look into this map of Earth, world, and you would find there are 9 critical tipping points which have been depicted in this particular map. Now, another tipping point we know about is the permafrost, as I have mentioned just now. The permafrost is a layer of permanently frozen ground in places like Canada, Greenland, and Russia. The vast Amazon rainforest, known as the Earth's lung, they are also at risk. If I can give you some idea of how critical this Amazon rainforest is to the Earth, to the climate system. You know, the Amazon absorbs more carbon dioxide than it releases. Something that would really help us out as we try to get an approach towards net zero. We aspire to to come close to the net zero, and Amazon rainforest can contribute immensely. The Amazon rainforest also creates up to half of its own rain just from the water evaporating from all the trees from the forest itself. You just think about the complex dynamism in this climate change discussion. The deforestation is messing with this ability to generate, and the deforestation in Amazon rainforest, it is resulting into getting drier every year, this forest, Amazon forest. And scientists say that there will be a moment, a small increase in temperature or any one drought year, which will cause large sections of the forest to die. And that is the tipping point, which may not be recovered back. The same forest will not return back. Instead, the rainforest could become a grassland. If and when any of this happens, then even if we reduce emissions, we will not go back to the same planet we have known because of these powerful natural tipping points. So tipping points aren't just environmental. Actually, everything we look around us, like settlements, the demography, agriculture, economy, they are all interconnected. A slight decrease in temperature during the hottest days can lead to health issues, as we have witnessed in Europe last year. Droughts and food shortages destabilize the societies, even governments. This we witnessed last year in Sri Lanka, where climate change drive to a hunger crisis and economic crisis. So these natural and social tipping points are interconnected. I gave you only few examples, but you just look around and you would find that there are many examples. Some of them, they are directly related with the weather extremes, but many of them, they are interrelated. The impact of one event is on some other phenomena, which ultimately is being observed by a section of people at certain location of the earth. So if ice sheet melts and sea level rise, the coastal cities will be lost, causing people to migrate towards away from coastal locations. Now this is going to lead demographic stresses and may lead to conflicts for resources, because the resources would be now further contested by migrated people. But this is only one dimension. So these tipping points can be countered through positive tipping points. And these positive tipping points can be achieved with our knowledge, with the technology which we possess, human beings possess. most importantly, understanding and our positive efforts. The good example, if I can cite, is the city of Amsterdam in Netherlands, where cycling as public transport started as an idea, but gradually it gained such momentum that people and even the government, that the entire city was redesigned to permanently move away from the cars and personal mode of traveling. And that is a positive tipping point. I'm giving you a very generalized example, but this is what is required. I'm hoping you are going to think about it and discuss about this and share with me or with your colleagues and counterparts at the place where you find that how the tipping points are approaching the human life. So I would say it's not all lost yet, and they may not all be so bad. Positive tipping points for the climate are also possible. You see around us, even in India, as solar and wind power grows, they are becoming, with the advanced technology, cheaper than fossil fuels. Electric vehicles are taking off. And our food habits have also changed a lot. Meat is being substituted by other commodities. Social norms are shifting. Here's a look at some of the potential positive shifts and ways they might be triggered. For example, first and foremost, I would say electric vehicles. In Norway, if I can give this example, 84% of new cars sold in January 2022 alone were electric. 84%. This is part of an accelerating move away from fossil fuel run vehicles. Another can be clean energy, the renewable power. For example, in India, solar and wind power generation. It is rapidly becoming the cheapest form of energy in most of the world. In India also. A reality that means even those who do not care about climate change are likely to find themselves using it. If I can give another example of Britain, they slashed climate changing emissions from its electricity supply by 8 times. The last decade by using a small carbon tax that made coal energy uncompetitive with gas. So these small steps, they can be the positive tipping points. But here, the technological advancement are great hope in the context of positive tipping points. But there should be an equal level of technology sharing also. Because not all the countries have higher level of technology. So this low carbon technology needs to be shared by developed worlds with the less developed countries. That is very important in the context of climate change. So as I have said that the evidences for climate change is irrefutable. Unless we act immediately to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we will not be able to stave off the worst consequences of climate change. The world is already 1.2 degrees centigrade warmer than pre-industrial time. And every fraction of a degree counts. As I mentioned, we have many examples of irreversible events, the tipping points. Then the world, the earth, may have detrimental impact. We will have more intense droughts and more devastating floods, more wildfires and more storms because of higher emission resulting global warming and all the related incidents in the context of climate change happens over the Earth's surface. So I would say our fragile planet is hanging by a thread. We are still knocking on the door of climate catastrophe. It is the time to go into emergency mode, or our chance of reaching net zero will itself be zero. So what any individual can do? Think. I would suggest keep fossil fuels in the ground itself. Don't mine it. The societies, the countries, they should not mine it. At first, the fossil fuels include coal, oil and gas. Is it possible? Very difficult. And the more that are extracted and burned, the worse climate change will get. So we need to move our dependence from fossil fuels as much as we can and as soon as possible. We need to invest in renewable energy, changing our main energy sources to clean and renewable energy. This is the best way to stop using fossil fuels. This includes technology, but the solar, wind, wave, tidal and geothermal power, there is great potential for generating these power, these renewable energy. There should be greater concentrated effort to switch to sustainable transport. Petrol and diesel vehicles, aeroplanes, sea ships, all of them they use fossil fuels. Reduction in car use, switching to electric vehicles, minimizing our movement if possible, all will reduce air pollution. Another important measure can be restoring nature to absorb more carbon. The natural world is very good at cleaning up our emissions, but we need to look after it. Planting trees in the right places or giving land back to the nature through rebuilding. These schemes are a good place to start. This is because we all know that photosynthesis process of plants draw down carbon dioxide as they grow, locking it away in soils. So we need to protect forests. Forests are crucial in the fight against climate change, and protecting them is an important climate solution. Cutting down forest on an industrial scale destroys giant trees which could be sucking up huge amount of carbon. Yet companies destroy forests to make way for animal farming. Oil plantation, palm oil plantation, soya plantation. So the government should stop making effective laws. We also need to protect the oceans, because oceans also absorb large amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere itself. It has its consequences, but still they are the large carbon sinks. These oceans help to keep our climate stable. But there are many activities which are threatening the sea resource also. Protecting oceans and the life in them is ultimately a way to protect ourselves from climate change. Another could be reduce and check how much people consume. That's also interesting and very effective. Our transport, our food habits, our lifestyle choices all have different impacts on the climate. This is often by commercialization of commodities with technology. The companies, the competition among them, for example, the different brands of mobile or car or bikes, we are tempted to have more and adopt different models. The kind of prosperity we have now achieved over the Earth's surface, few societies, few group of people, they are tempted by having more than one mode of, say, transportation, car, bikes, mobile. Everything has its impact on the climate. So all this materialistic tendencies release far more emissions to produce than are realistically needed. But while reducing consumption of these products might be hard, it's most certainly worth it. Reducing overall consumption in more wealthy countries can help put less strain on the planet. That's very significant. I may explain it as we are living over this earth surface and using different commodities every day. We have impact over the earth. You can call it your carbon footprint, although this term we will be discussing later, but just to understand our living on the earth in this context, our impact over nature, our impact over the earth, I am using this term of carbon footprint. One very common example, you commute from one place to another place. You may use car, bus, bike, and all of them, they emit gases in different proportion. So you would feel that, you imagine that this is what your carbon footprints. No. First, this is one mode of transportation you are using. Now you look around and imagine how many vehicles are plying on the roads. But what you imagine is the issue is much more than that. It is beyond that, because the release by vehicle is only one dimension. Think of how the petrol reached to your fuel station. Very interesting. You see, I'm not sure if you have ever thought about it. We are only concerned of our own emissions. But this emission is the result of chain reaction. So for example, you have used bike and you have used your nearby fuel station to fill your tank. Now this fuel station, it might be drawing oil, petrol somewhere from Gulf country or in Russia or from Venezuela, because India do not produce and we import. The process of drawing this oil from well also requires energy. There is also emission of energy there. Then it is transported to some storage, again some emission. Then it again transported to some seaport, because this is what generally is the preferred mode of transportation from far off distances. The pipelines remain within the country, but when we are importing from other countries, it is through sea container. Large ships, they also emit. Then transfer to sea container. The ship carries it for thousands of kilometers, reaching up to the Indian port. Again there is emission. There again transfer to distribution depot. This would be in our country. Then ultimately to our fuel station through truck. So during this entire process, imagine how much energy was used and emissions were added to the atmosphere. So when we calculate the carbon footprint, you just imagine how complex it is and how massive it is. Now this is only about your movement, about your vehicle. Think about the different commodities which we are using. The process of manufacturing and distribution. At every stage, we are emitting dangerous gases. All these processes, they use energy and emit emission. They emit gases. For example, the paper you use for study, the food you eat, or the food you waste, or any resource you use or misuse, energy is used. Emission is added to the atmosphere. This is how emissions are increasing and added into our atmosphere, resulting into global warming or the larger phenomena of climate change. I am sure that you would be now understood this complex cycle of climate system. So imagine this cycle is for one individual. Consider the cycle again adding two important components. First, increase in population over the earth's surface. Second, the commercial nature of resource production, which is not for fulfilling the need, but to maximizing the output. This way, the societies have exploited the resources mercilessly over the Earth's surface, putting Earth in stress, and we are observing the impact in the form of climate change. So think and act in such a way to reduce the emissions. Nature has mechanisms for our need, but not for our greed. Think, be judicious. Happy learning.